And welcome to Essence of Wonder, this week again without Gadi Evron. I'm Alan Bond, and this is Neve Kearney joining me to talk about some great stuff, why representation matters. We've got some wonderful guests today. Specifically, we've got some student activists from PARU, the Panther Anti-Racist Union, who've been fighting and successfully defeated the book ban in Pennsylvania in Central York School District. And then we've got the two new publishers of Mermaids Monthly to talk about their speculative fiction magazine and the Kickstarter for that. That's exciting. Neve, what do you know about these guests, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I know about as much as I need. No, I've read the fact that they've made it to the New York Times. Their activism is like so beyond anything I have ever achieved in my life, and they are just out here doing something that, like, thankfully not something that I've had to experience. Like, I haven't experienced book bans in my education system ever, but the fact that seems to be a thing that continually happens in other countries is, sad, bad, and real.
Yeah, and it seems to be a big trend right now in the United States and a lot of our country. There's a lot of anger over, and I don't really comprehend where it's coming from, over efforts to make the world more equitable. Well, I've got thoughts about imperialism and the corporate structure, and trying to get the working classes fighting against each other so that they don't pay attention to how anyways. With that, let's bring up our first guests. First up, I'm going to bring up Ida Gupta. She is the president of PARU. Welcome, Ida.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here today.
So I wanted to ask you to quickly introduce yourself so that folks have a sense of who you are.
Sure. I'm Ida Gupta. I'm the president of the Panther Anti-Racist Union at Central York High School, and one of the main people that have been organizing protests and really speaking at all the rallies we've been doing and speaking to the board and really trying to get this ban reversed.
Awesome. You inspire me. Next up, I'm going to bring Olivia Pituch. I'm probably butchering that, but thank you and welcome. You are the social media coordinator?
Yeah, I'm actually the secretary and the social media advisor of PARU.
Welcome. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes. So I'm Olivia Pachuk, and like I said, I'm the secretary and social media advisor, and I'm a senior at Central York High School.
Welcome. All right. And then I'm also introducing the two faculty advisors, Ben Hodge and Patricia Jackson. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my first question is sort of like just what the timeline is for all of this. We started off with, where did all of this start from? Where did the book ban come from? Why are people trying to limit what people have access to?
So start of the book ban, talk of the book ban began November 2020, when last summer of 2020, teachers on a diversity resource committee, after the George Floyd protests, I should say the George Floyd murder, started creating a list of resources for students all over the district to use in the classroom to be more cognizant of the difference between themselves and their peers, and to learn more about race, diversity, and equity in the classroom and in America in general, because they felt that was something important to be incorporated. So in November, the board started looking at this list and saying they wanted to vet the list or look over it before this was incorporated into the classroom. So as this talk started and as it progressed throughout the school year, the board decided in August of the summer, August 11th, to be exact, of 2021, they sent out an email to a lot of teachers in the district, including Mr. Hodge and Ms. Jackson, that had a banned resource list on it and said, these resources are not permitted to be used in the classrooms. For a time, they were taken out of libraries for teachers to use and not available for children to use in the classroom. Now, being in this district for all 12 years of my life and getting my whole education from here, it's not something I expected for the district to do, and it's not something that I initially understood at all. And as I've been kind of going through this process and organizing these rallies and with everyone in Peru, there's also been a lot of reflection. And in reflection, the board, in my opinion, felt threatened and of their position, their reputation, and how they were perceived. And because of this, fear, this kind of ban was inspired and brought to light and was supported by some people.
All right. And then what was the process that you guys went to organize these protests and fight this ban?
So me, along with many of the other officers, executive officers of Peru, we went straight to Mr. Hodge and we asked him immediately, well, what are you going to do about it? Like, what should we do? And he turned it back around and asked us what we were going to do about it. So we all got thrown in a group chat together, all of us executive officers, and we just kind of talked about the entire issue, talked about what needed to be done, et cetera, et cetera. And one of our officers decided to push out a blackout on the next day, which would have been a Friday. So we pushed it out all over social media and said, if you don't support this book ban, we're all black or we're black on Friday. So we had a lot of people show up wearing black. And then on Monday, we decided to start our protests. So it happened from 7:15 to 7:30 before school at the high school. It was high school students and teachers, and any faculty or admin that wanted to be there. And we had those every day that week, and then Monday and Friday of the following week. And we had executive officers and volunteers make signs for us. And we stood out there every day in front of the school.
Awesome. I think we have some photos of some of those protests. Should we bring those up? Let's see. Here we go. Can you describe what this is?
So this was actually one of our protests that happened before a board meeting. We all decided to, we had a community protest where we had a lot of speakers, as you can see. Mr. Hodge is speaking in this one. So we had a lot of speakers. We had, performers, all these kind of things. And it was really beautiful to see the community come together under this cause.
Right. We've got a couple more pictures. What about this one?
So that was one of I'm pretty sure it was actually our first protest in front of the school. That was kind of our initial starting group of students who protested with us.
That's a lot of folks out for that first protest.
Yes.
What's this one?
That was us talking to a lot of people and kind of explaining our message and our story at one of our later walk-ins.
All right, and this next one, it looks like it's that same event.
Yes. That was us just speaking to the protesters of why we were out there and what we want, what change we wanted.
And then, is this the same event or is this another event?
That was the first photo was about that community protest. This was part of the community protest. We had books laying right there, and those were all books that were on the banned list. So it was really beautiful to see all the community members come out, and that was before we really had our full crowd.
So tell me, what is the most egregious example of a book that would be on that list? Something that really shouldn't have been. Well, they all shouldn't have been, but
yeah. I think a lot of people were surprised to see Malala on that list. Biographies of the Nobel Prize winner, whose story is just about heroism, activism, and bravery, and how to be a leader in your community. And that was one that was, at the forefront where people were questioning, like, why is a book about this inspiring woman that helped so many people and all over and had a national, international influence on the world? Why are books by her banned? There was also so many innocent children's books just talking about inclusion that were egregious to be banned. I know that like many books published by Scholastic, Hidden Figures, that Olivia likes a lot. I mean, I do too. It's a book about women, you know, pursuing careers in mathematics, and it's a story about history. So it was kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think that leads into one of my other questions, which is which book on this list really means the most for you, and I'd like Ben and Patricia also to answer this question.
Well, for me, it'd have to be a book called I Am Enough. It's a children's book by Grace Byers. And it literally says on the front cover, I'm paraphrasing, but like this book is about equity, inclusion, and a young Black girl's journey to loving herself. And in the illustrations in this book, there are people from all backgrounds, from all religions, and it's just a great book for children to be like introduced to the diversity that is so existent in our world and it's surrounding us. And it really hurt me because, you know, reading that book, if I had that type of book in a library when I was young, I would have had such an easier time accepting myself and loving myself and being a part and feeling like I belonged and it was good for me to take up space in the community that I was living in.
The book that there's so many books on the list that mean a ton to me, but I would say one of my favorites is Hidden Figures. Like Ida was talking about, it's a book about an incredible group of four Black women, and it explains how their roles in NASA and how, like, I mean, whenever a lot of people, when you hear NASA, the common thought is men, and the common thought is white men. But this book shows that it's not at all just a group of white men. If you really dig into it, these four incredible Black women made so many advances, made so many discoveries, and made NASA what it is today. And I think that's so important to hear because a lot of people don't know that. And they're so important to that story. So it's really, really inspiring and incredible to read that story. I really like it.
My favorite little book that I really enjoyed, this is the first one that I came across, was Not Quite Snow White. And anyone who can find CRT in this book or any of the others mentioned, you're not fit to be a parent or an elected official. This is a book about a little girl who is told that she's too dark to take the lead role of Snow White, but she auditions anyway and she wins the role. I am a child who suffered as a result of not being represented, whether it was in the media or it was in books. And that was Star Wars, my favorite franchise, and also Lord of the Rings, that I watched a little sadness because no one looks like me. And when I became a writer at the tender age of 8, and my debut novel was coming out in November, I was going to reverse that. I was going to change that because particularly in speculative fiction, I don't see a lot of people who look like me. So I changed that and made sure that my protagonist was a Black person.
Congratulations on that debut novel. That's Forging a Nightmare, right?
Yes.
All right, awesome. And Ben?
I think he
Is
might
Ben frozen?
He
Yeah,
looks frozen.
All right. Well, then we'll come back to Ben when he's less frozen.
Little less icy.
What's that?
A little less icy.
little less icy. Yeah. We were talking about color temperature earlier. So you bring up CRT, and I know a lot of the anger that is going on in this country right now is mentioning CRT, but it seems like more of a red herring because CRT is not what's happening in the public schools or the private schools or any primary school, elementary, middle, or high. Can you tell me a little bit about why that is not what's happening?
For myself, I almost feel like the Klan is having a resurrection. And they used to burn crosses to intimidate people. Only now the new Klan is not intimidating people of color. They're intimidating other white people. And the crosses they're burning are catchphrases like indoctrination, Marxism, communism, diversity. And It is wrong. It is fear. It is feeling that they're losing power. And you're not losing any power. You are uplifting other people. You are uplifting the entire human race. And I don't understand why there's any fear in that. But that's what is happening. You have this weird McCarthyism coming back into things. And as a teacher, you must teach these things, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You must put them in a safe space so that children can dissect them and recognize them so that they never happen again. We recently had a man speak at the board meeting, talk about all the evil things that communism has done and all the people that have died as a result of it. You don't talk about the number of people who have died because of democracy. You don't talk about the people who died in the Middle Passage, the Africans who died. You don't talk about the Africans and African Americans who died enslaved as animals. You want to hide that. You want to suppress that. Not fair.
And I think something else to add to that is these books we were never pushing them as part of the curriculum. They were resources to use. They were resources to have at the back of your classroom in your classroom library. They were books that if the kid is wanting to like research something, you say, oh yes, I have a bunch of books or a bunch of resources that can be used for this. And I think something else is a lot of people have a not very accurate definition of CRT, and I don't think anyone really does. It's not an understood topic. People have taken what they heard and ran with it. And it has become a game of telephone where one person thinks it's this, and then it just grows and grows and grows and grows into something that's not even really close to what the idea of CRT really even is.
I also want to add that, I'm sorry, with whatever we're doing, the district claims, the board claims that they're doing it for the betterment of the students. But in reality, you're going to have students graduating from your district and not knowing how to conduct themselves in a world. In the real world, diversity is real. We ourselves are the second most diverse district in York. And this diversity existing around us, it is not the right education to teach children to be colorblind to their differences, because differences are what makes us beautiful. The immigration to America is what makes America beautiful. And understanding these differences rather than blanketing and saying that we're going to be colorblind to them is not doing people of color a favor. It's only doing them a disservice. And so we are all standing up for the children, not only going to that are going to graduate the district after us, because we're all seniors. We're doing this so students our age can also better conduct themselves in the world and know what they're doing.
I also think it's doing white kids a major disservice as well. So I agree with what Ida just said, but I also want to add on to what Olivia was talking about. This semantics word game that people are playing with these phrases, TRT, and it's code language. It's code language that has been in this country for hundreds of years, right? And it's code language. So in the 60s, integration was the code word, the nice way of saying, we don't want integration. That was the negative word that is a beautiful thing that shouldn't be a questionable concept, but was being thrown around like it was some sort of buzzword for Marxism and communism or whatever else they were worried about. And then you have, when I was in school in the 90s, it was multiculturalism that was coming out. And so people were freaking out about multiculturalism when really that's exactly what we are. We should be viewed as that. So it doesn't make any sense that in a multicultural, multiracial country, at least on principle, founded as such, we know that the actions of the country show otherwise. So this whole throwing around these buzzwords to diversity as negative, like I've said this so many times, diversity is not a word to be afraid of. It never should be. I don't know why we're afraid of that in this. Some people are afraid of this in this country. So it really, really begs the question for me, like, what are you really afraid of? And if be honest with yourselves, and that this country needs to be honest with itself about what it's really afraid of. And I think the answer is they're afraid of losing power. They're afraid, like James Baldwin says, that if we give BIPOC folks power, they're going to turn around and do the same things to white people that white people did to Black people and BIPOC people in this country. And that's, in my experience, that's not true. That they're asking for what Jimmy Baldwin asked for. We just want what you want. We want to be left alone, and we want to live our lives. That's it. Like, it's not rocket science, but yet we want to throw these words in here and cause all sorts of problems. And it's just unfortunate because it's a semantics, denotation, connotation word game that is really ridiculous.
All right. Well, on that note, we do need to move on to our second segment. We'll bring you guys all back at the end of the show to have a roundtable with everybody. But for now, we're going to be moving on to talk to Mermaids Monthly. Thank you guys all for being on. We'll be right back. Give me a second. I'm going to switch out who's on screen. All right. So for Mermaids Monthly, Mermaids Monthly is a speculative fiction magazine that was started, I think it was a year or two ago, with a focus on mermaids, surprisingly. They've had a number of different themes for their magazines, for everything from selkies to all ages to tidelands, things like that, and so we're going to get a sense of where it's moving in the future. The publishing team that started the magazine wanted to step down and did a search for a incoming publishing team, and we have the luck to have the incoming publishing team with us today. Do you want to do an introduction? We have Jane and Noelle. Jane Pinkard writes fiction about magic and space travel, and nonfiction about games, technology, and culture. She's been published in, she was the co-founder of Story Kitchen Studio, and has been published in Strange Horizons, Uncanny Magazine, OneUp.com, Electronic Gaming Monthly, Salon Magazine, and other venues. She's a member of the SIFWA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and serves on the editorial board of Well Played Journal from ETC Press at Carnegie Mellon. And Noelle, welcome, is a Surinamese Jamaican American, born and raised in Queens, New York, a multimedia artist and baking enthusiast with a love of nature, specifically the ocean. Graduated college with an art degree and double minor in environmental science and media, society, and the arts. While in college, honed the skill with writing, editing, and photography, and learned about social media marketing and graphic design, and also has a scuba certificate and studied coral reef biology and ecology. Welcome, you guys. Amazing.
Hi.
So Mermaids Monthly did that national search. What led you guys to apply?
I'll go. I had admired Mermaids Monthly since they launched. I backed their Kickstarter, and I just thought, wow, this is great, both because the theme was so specific. And, I think Julia and Meg, who founded it, were like, why not mermaids every month, all the time? And also, I just really admired them as creators. They had worked in other publications before, so I knew of their work, and they had a great reputation. I've actually been lucky enough to work with Julia as an editor when they edited one of my pieces. And so when the applications opened, I was like, yeah, I want to learn from them. I want to have a sort of short internship and then take over and continue what they did, which I think is so awesome.
Kind of the same thing what Jane said. I enjoyed reading it, and when they started looking for people to take over, I was like, I want to be a part of this. such an exciting thing to be able to work with this team.
Awesome. So one of the things that I know that was important to them at the start, and I think is important to you as well, is that representation matters. Like when they did the all ages, they wanted to make sure that all ages were represented. And I know with mermaids, they sort of represent the border between two different cultures in and of themselves. How has the magazine sort of brought forward that theme, and how do you intend to continue that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think from the very beginning, the magazine was very clear about supporting marginalized writers who are marginalized along many different kinds of axes. Like, obviously, there's a lot of BIPOC writer representation, but also a lot of queer writers. And so a lot of the themes of Mermaids Monthly ended up being so you could say queer themes or themes about identity. And to me, mermaids have always been about, like you said, they're sort of in the liminal space between worlds, and so I think it's really appropriate, and that's one of the things that attracted me to the magazine, and obviously I'd want to keep that. The other thing I just want to mention is that our editor is going to be Vida Cruz. And she brought up a really important point. She wanted to have at least 50% of our content sourced from outside the United States. So that's going to be our new goal, is to maintain the sort of diversity and inclusion, but also reach beyond our US-centric borders to get writers from all over the world.
I mean, Jane did a great job. As someone who is coming from two different backgrounds, I identified with mermaids being between two different things, and I feel like a lot of people identify with that. And having somewhere that you can safely express those ideas without certain criticisms, I think was really important.
I'm assuming code switching is part of that negotiating. Like mermaids have to code switch between being in the water and being on land, but lots of other folks have to code switch between different cultures that you're in, right? So what are some of the plans that you have for the magazine coming forward?
We talked a lot about growth. We're looking to have 50% of our submissions from outside the US. We want to continue growing Mermaids Monthly, building more of a community. We're going to be opening up some different social media platforms where people will be able to share their ideas on not just Mermaids Monthly, but mermaids in general, and be able to talk to other people about it.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to, because Noelle mentioned social media, and Noelle is going to be sort of directing the social media, but we are also hiring JD Harlock, who is based in Lebanon. So we've got Vida in the Philippines and JD in Lebanon. So I feel like we're starting to get that international coverage a little bit.
So I know that Mermaids Monthly have had monthly themes, and I know some of the recent ones, like there was Selkies, and then was it all ages or all bodies or something like that? What are some of the themes that you have upcoming? I believe we have a photo of your September magazine, right? Let me pull that up.
Yeah, the art.
So what is the theme for
beautiful.
this magazine? Oh, wrong.
There we go.
I actually don't know, because Noelle and I haven't officially rolled on to the day-to-day operations.
Got it.
So it's kind of a surprise to us every month too, which is kind of cool.
So going forward, do you know of any themes that you want to make sure that you do in your tenure?
That's a great question, Noelle. I bet you've thought about this.
I know that we did a queer issue this year. I wanted to do a Black-centered issue and have different Black creators be able to submit their work
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I know you have a Kickstarter. Can you describe what's happening there?
So that's going to happen next month. More details forthcoming. We're in the planning stages of it now. And one of the most fun things about planning a Kickstarter is thinking about the rewards.
And I know you guys provided a picture of some of the rewards that you have coming up. I'm pulling that up now. Can you describe what these are and where they're coming from?
So these are all handmade by me. I do different jewelry and decor, I guess, using seashells, sand, natural elements. And I know we have both JD and Vita are offering some help with editing as part of our Kickstarter. And we have a few other exciting prizes lined up.
I just want to say I didn't know you made these when I saw them earlier, Noelle, but the minute the image came up, I said, I don't have my ears pierced and I desperately want those earrings.
Thank you. I have my pair on now.
They're so pretty.
All right. So a lot of the magazine and the theme of the show this week is why representation matters. Can you speak to how your magazine speaks to that theme and what story has that you've read in the magazine, because you haven't published it yet yourselves? What story really drew you to the magazine in that sense?
Wow, it's hard to think of just one, especially because for me, what drew me was, like I said, the initial Kickstarter and just hearing their vision for the magazine. I also kind of don't want to call out any single author as my favorite, but I think for me, what I've loved are the stories about mermaids. I feel like there are a lot of stories that are sort of about figuring out who you are and where you belong thematically, which I think is very appropriate to mermaids. And yeah, and I think, again, that's a big part of why representation matters. The reason that we want to see ourselves reflected in stories is because it helps us better understand who we are and how we fit into our communities. And I think that's super important.
I've just really enjoyed reading so many different stories from different backgrounds and different places, and seeing all of the different ways that people interpret mermaids.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna pull everybody back up, and we're gonna have a roundtable discussion with everyone. So, bringing back up Paru. Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Hey.
So do you guys have questions for each other?
I just want to say, from what I've heard that you guys have been doing, that's so amazing. I'll definitely have to look into more into Mermaids Monthly, but it's like you guys are advocating the exact opposite of what our district wants to suppress, but it's still so refreshing to see people like you out there, and that not only want to amplify voices, but make it a priority in whatever you guys do, and you guys make it a must do in every one of your publications, and that's just amazing.
Thank you.
Liv, you're muted, baby.
There we go. Sorry. I love that you have diversity on the full scale also. So you don't just have BIPOC voices. You also covered, like you said, you have queer issues and stuff like that, which is that's super awesome.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I just have to say, I'm so inspired by hearing about what you've done and how you've managed to galvanize your community around this issue. And just, I mean, that takes a lot of, effort and vision.
No, I felt what you were saying about being in between. And that's a lonely road to walk. I mean, thankfully I was an only child, so I didn't care. But walking in between, it's so powerful. And to hear someone else talk about that, and you have so many people that are experiencing that, and they get to read about that and see that they're not alone, truly powerful. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank
and I can
you.
also relate to that. Being Indian American in this country, there's always been two separate identities that I've had to come align myself with, and be comfortable with, and expected to, portray at different moments in my life. So it's definitely so empowering to see audiences probably become more comfortable with themselves to reading your material.
Thank you. I think people will see what you're doing and be empowered by seeing you stand up for what you believe is right.
Thank you. We're hoping that, our goal, now at least, we originally had some smaller goals, but now that our message is really getting out there, we've kind of formed a lot more bigger goals, or more longer, long time goals. And one of I think the main ones are inspiring others to stand up for what's right, because we've already kind of been seeing it. We kind of got our voices out there and showed that just because we're young doesn't mean we don't have a voice. And after that, we've seen a lot of incredible teens stand up for things that are happening in their schools, and it's so incredible to see that the people are beginning to really get their voices out there and advocate for themselves and others. So.
Yeah, and if you're allow me to speak to white educators, or any educators, but particularly other white educators, is that just listen. And just everybody, it's a good note for everybody, but just listen. That's how my journey started. I was an acting teacher, and I met people on the diversity program, and it linked in perfectly with some of the mental health stuff that I was discovering in 2006 when 4 years into my teaching career. And I realized that these things are all kind of connected. So I was learning about trauma, like racial trauma, before I even knew I had the word to define what it was, because I would hear stories of my young students sharing, I'm a white girl in a black girl's body, kids writing these beautiful pieces about identity and trying to describe what it feels like to be in that in between that you were talking about. And while that's not my experience per se necessarily, it's just not hard to just sit down and have some empathy and just listen. Just listen. And it's transformational. It made me a better teacher. It made me a better human being. And I learned from Layla Saad's Me and White Supremacy. It made me be a better ancestor. I hope and I pray that these types of conversations can give hope to people who are out there on the fringe, who are unsure about whether or not they should say something or do something, or if they're afraid to say yes, because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And so I just appreciate y'all sharing your stories and your art. I get so much from seeing so much beauty and creative talent. I think we all as humans can agree that there's so much beauty in this world. We just have to look for it.
And to kind of go right off of what Mr. Hodge said, and what Ms. Jackson had said, I didn't even really realize that all of those bigger, films, bigger stories like Lord of the Rings and all those other things, it didn't even occur to me that there were almost no BIPOC people in them. And it wasn't until I really heard people's opinions, heard people's sides of things, and really started looking into it that I realized it. And that's kind of what we're really, our whole point is, education can take you such a far way. I learned from Miss Jackson and Ida and all the other executive officers. I learned signs of racism, microaggressions. I learned what things are harmful and the importance of culture and representation. I learned all these things. And that's really what we're trying to get at. Like, I didn't just, like, I have never experienced racism. I'm white. I've never had to deal with that. So it's important to learn about these things. And that's kind of what we're pushing for. We want people to learn about these things. And that's I guess, our whole goal.
And I also wanted to add that I think that where we're at now is there's like an epidemic of having tunnel vision, where you are so comfortable where you are that it is so hard to step out. And even if it makes you uncomfortable, and even if it brings up questions in your mind that you have to answer, and it makes you view the world from different perspectives, that there's some aversion to that. And I think that's why, from the beginning, I've been saying, like, if the board was just willing to talk and have constructive discussions where, they would open their minds a little bit to understand some other perspectives of the world. Because, there's no way that you've lived as a teenage Indian American girl in this district for 12 years. That's just not something that could have ever happened to you. So if you would just, try to understand, you pick the people that you surround yourself with for a reason. And if you look at your surroundings and you recognize the disparity there between like who you choose to surround yourself with, then maybe you'll recognize that there's more to see with this world. And I think that education is so essential to that.
And I'm super excited about your magazine because I'm also the advisor to the beautiful people at our high school, which is the LGBTQIA plus group. And I have a young lady who wrote a beautiful story about queer love, a queer girl who falls in love with a trans male at a conversion camp. And they have their first kiss, and it's beautiful. And we wanted to submit that story to the state writing contest. Her mother refused to sign the form. The mother said, "I am disappointed in you. You're not my daughter." And I am crushed. I'm a teacher of creative writing. I believe in queer voices. I am a straight cis woman, but I am a fierce advocate. And it's one of the most beautiful stories I have read from a child. And we're going to get it published somewhere.
Hell yeah.
But I am so thankful that your magazine is going to uplift that, because this ban also included books about this community as well. Beautiful books about the history of LGBTQIA plus people. And we want to get those voices out there too. So thank you.
Yeah, agree.
Thank you. We do want to get those voices out there, and we do want people to know the history behind these voices.
So I wanted to, if I could, real quick. This is the book that was based on, or the movie that the book is. I'm Not Your Negro, which was a documentary by the amazing Raoul Peck, an amazing author and director. And he set out on a journey to create a documentary film about James Baldwin, an immortalized, amazing human being, a queer, Black activist human being who in the 60s did so much and called himself a witness during a time of our history that was extremely rough. And, Carla Christopher, who is a local pastor in our area, spoke at an event. We were at a Black Lives Matter rally back in June. And she said that racism is a disgusting, vile thing that affects so many people. But if you didn't know who James Baldwin was, you're a victim of racism. Right. And I was an English major. I had never read James Baldwin. I took African-American history classes, and I never read James Baldwin because this man was kept from me. And I can admit that I didn't seek him out, but I didn't know. It wasn't in my perspective, as like Olivia was talking about. So this whole importance of education. And I'll never forget, I got his books and saw some videos of him on YouTube. And I was like, where has this person been? I was mad that I hadn't heard about James Baldwin. So This is from his the book that he was writing about Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, and Martin Luther King Jr., three of his really closest friends who died in the 60s, very close, within a span of a few years. And there's something that I wanted to just read on page 90. This is James Baldwin, and it really speaks to me about like where we are as a country. And it's just mind-boggling to me that this is written in the 60s, right? And it's still so eloquent today. If we listened to him, we would probably be a lot better off. For a long time, America prospered. This prosperity cost millions of people their lives. Now, not even the people who are the most spectacular recipients of the benefits of this prosperity are able to endure these benefits. They can neither understand them nor do without them. Above all, they cannot imagine the price paid by their victims or subjects for this way of life. And so they cannot afford to know why the victims are revolting. There is a formula for a nation or kingdom's decline, for no kingdom can maintain itself by force alone. Force, and he closes with this, force does not work the way its advocates think, in fact, it does. It does not, for example, reveal to the victim the strength of the adversary. On the contrary, it reveals the weakness, even the panic of the adversary, and this revelation invests the victim with patience. I mean, this is where we are still. We've just been patiently. And what did Martin Luther King say about the arc of justice? It's always the history bends towards justice. These people, all these are school board members that are doing this, these what we would say adversarial tactics. They're afraid. They are afraid, and they think they're winning. But we just have to be. We can be patient, but we have to be vigilant.
So it came up books, seeing yourself in books when we were talking about the Lord of the Rings, and I know for me, I don't remember the first time I saw myself in a book. And I know that's not an experience that's universal because there are so many books about white males or male presenting folks that are such endemic to what was accepted literature for the longest time. It wasn't that other stories weren't being written. It's just that they weren't being published. What were the first stories that you guys remember seeing yourselves in as you grew up?
Great question.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think I could tell you that.
I mean, I'll tell you a painful story of I had a 300-page manuscript and it was a fantasy story. I was a freshman in college. I went to a historically Black campus for the first time because I had grown up in a white world and I was very excited. And I remember my professor not looking at page 1. I remember her leaning across the desk like a panther about to strike, put her hands across the manuscript. How many Black people are in your novel? And I didn't have an answer for her. And I resented her. I stopped writing. I didn't write for years after that because I didn't have an answer for her. And I had chills because I was a little broken. And then when I got into writing Star Wars, I sort of experimented a little bit with a lot of characters. I mentioned their skin color, but that was it. Because with my father, you didn't mention your skin color because you didn't call attention to yourself because that wasn't safe. And it wasn't until Forging a Nightmare that I kind of had an exorcism where, like Noelle, I have a character who's half human, half angel. So I sort of stayed away from the Black thing, half human, half angel, but he's still between because he's not accepted. And that was where I found myself, where I could be fierce and unapologetically Black. Because we fail to talk about how Black women love so fiercely and commit so fully to things. So yeah, I'm so happy, and I'm happy to share that journey, particularly for anyone from a marginalized community to accept themselves. And writing is so healing to allow them to find themselves where the world has not placed them. because the world has said you're not important, you don't matter. These things don't exist. You shouldn't look for them. Yes, you should look for them. And if they're not there, you should create them.
Yes, Patricia, I couldn't agree more. Write your own stories.
Yes.
I mean, and now I'm seeing a lot more Indian American representation in books than I'd ever seen when I was younger. Like it makes me so happy because, young children of Indian American descent in this country, and even like Asian American descent, like, because, in my culture, it's not very much promoted to, be artistic or being the model minority in this country. It is not promoted to speak out against the injustices against you or to stand up in any way. My parents came here. I'm a first generation immigrant. They were taught to, make a living, earn a living, and, stay quiet and be in your household. And I'm so happy to see that, people of the model minority descent are finally finding it in themselves to take a stand, because just because we weren't, vocal about the adversity we face in this country doesn't mean it didn't exist. So I'm so happy for that.
Noelle, Jane, Neve, you guys haven't answered the question either. When was the first time you saw yourselves in a book?
Yeah. I mean,
not
I guess
even
the
sure.
thing is, as a kid, I always read books and saw myself as the white male boy protagonist. I'm not, but those were the books that I gravitated towards. But at the same time, there was no difficulty for me to find. One of the books I read when I was 12 years old was about a trio of Irish siblings on an Irish island. We published the books for the people that are this specific group. So I never lacked it. And obviously I could see myself represented in media everywhere, or at least parts of myself.
It's such a hard question. Sometimes I still feel like it's hard to find myself in books, and it's so few and far between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it was until I was an adult, honestly. Maybe Kazuo Ishiguro has a book, the Pale Hills, something about pale and hills, and there's a half Japanese, half white female protagonist in it, and I was like, oh, finally. I mean, I grew up partly in Japan, so there was no end of sort of, Japanese protagonists that I was exposed to, but that didn't feel like me either. So yeah, it's hard.
I mean, like, as growing up, whenever I read stories, they would talk about like the pale skin and the soft blonde hair. I have coarse curly hair. Where's the appreciation for that? Or like, the dark, rich skin, or like just how they described characters. It just, like Miss Jackson was saying, it makes you portray the world from a different perspective.
I recently had a book grammar, I guess you call them, on Instagram talk about my book. She's from Nigeria. And when you talk about this speculative genre, you think you should be represented. And she said she read the book and somehow she just assumed the protagonist had, blonde hair, blue or green eyes, and was a white person, had fair skin. And somewhere she hit something where she realized he's Black. He has dreadlocks. I have dreadlocks. We just gush about it. It was so wonderful. And I remember reading something where someone pushed back with their privilege and said, well, there's no Africa in Star Wars, so there's no need for races. And what that said to me was, again, you don't matter. You don't need to be represented. So I wrote a source book for the role-playing game called Black Sands of Socorro because I wanted to know where the Black people were in Star Wars, because I just had to know.
I love that. That's so good.
This is why colorblindness needs to go away immediately. Yeah. This whole, again, that's another, here we go, semantics wise, And then to double down on that, they'll quote Martin Luther King Jr. content of their character, not the color of their skin, and then negate to read the rest of the speech that it entails, or the rest of his work. You know, we have to see color. We have to, and we have to learn to celebrate it and enjoy it. And I'm talking as a white male, like, I think I have to see it. I don't want to not see it. And this whole concept of melting pot, like where we all kind of melt into one thing. No. And I know that's still being taught. Like, we're not a melting pot. We're not.
We're a vibrant salad.
That's right. We're a salad. Thank you.
And to go right off of that, like, I don't understand why people are so afraid of putting diversity in stories, just like Mr. Hodge said, because I'm reading a series right now, and there is so much diversity, and it adds so much to the story. There are characters with different backgrounds, different religions, different races, and it's like fascinating to see how they contrast to each other, how it affects who they are as a person, what struggles they go through, issues with their households, and like growing up in a certain like area and stuff like that. It just adds so much to the story, the characters, and it's also just fascinating to learn about different cultures and different things that go on in the world. So I just don't understand why people are so against diversity when it's so incredible.
The reason this whole thing at our school happened is because they think that being colorblind is a preferable ideology to view people of color. That is why, because they chose to ignore what was so essential about our identity, because they thought that was doing us. I still cannot wrap my head around how people think it is doing us better for people of color to not view them from all perspectives.
For some white cultures, it was a way of becoming part of the mainstream, was to lose their identities in whiteness, which is an artificial identity. And so their emphasis on colorblindness oftentimes is saying it worked for us, it should work for you, but it doesn't even really work for them. Thinking about folks who were originally not considered white, like the Irish and the Italians and the Polish, they were able to assimilate because of the color of their skin eventually, but
even so,
by negating their cultures.
Negating their cultures, exactly. But those people still have their cultures. Like, there are Italian Americans for a reason. Irish Americans are a huge thing, because even within the homogenous whiteness that is what apparently people want to go towards, where people are allowed to have cultures and differences. That's what diversity is. It's not like you're like, oh, you can't, we're all the same, we're all equal, but we're all our own people. And I don't think that should be negated for any group. Like, being gay doesn't make you not a person.
Exactly. And we really need to be focusing on celebrating cultures, because that's where we get to identity and really encouraging people to welcome and understand each other. Because when you're being blind to people's identity, which I'm thinking was what you were saying, is that you don't see that person. You're looking past them. You're plastering over them to say everything's fine here. I remember growing up, that basically being taught about the civil rights movement as history, and thinking, oh, it's all fine now, but it wasn't. The Rodney King riots for me was the seminal point where it was like, no, this is still happening now, and since then you keep seeing it happening, and as you see more of it, you see just how horrible it has been all along.
I mean,
Alan, that's an excellent point when you talk about, what people see of you and how they put their image on you instead of who you really are. And going back to James Baldwin, he talks about that, where he says you have to force the world to see who you are, not allow them for you to be the idea of what they think you are. And we are all teachers without knowing it. And some of our greatest teachers are our children, like the two in this room talking to us. And we need to listen to their stories There's a fantastic saying that when a person dies, a library burns. And it's just a wonderful story of the ancestors and what we lose. But a lot of educators negate children and think, oh, you don't have enough experience. You don't know where that child is coming from. And the stories they have to tell can enrich you and enrich the other children in the classroom, because for many children, that is the first diversity they are going to encounter in the classroom, and it will have a lasting impact or a lasting trauma on them.
And I think that the microaggressions I faced in my life, the racism I faced in my life comes from white people finding a space where they feel most comfortable, and then again projecting a certain stereotypical image on me, or a list of categories that I fit into, or a box. You know, being Indian American, of course she's studious, of course she's gonna not be interested in theater, of course she's only going to be interested in a few career paths, you know, of course she's not going to get incorporated with activism. And like the colorblindness is why this is happening. And like it is so normalized and ingrained in our society that no one can notice it unless you are a person of color, which is we come out of that perspective.
Well, I have to apologize to everyone, but we've come to the end of our hour. I know we all have so much more that we can say on this topic, and there is so much more to explore about representation and why it's so important in the fiction we read, and what place speculative fiction has in promoting that representation. We hope that people are willing to join this conversation with us in comments or in the future on future shows. But this has been Essence of Wonder, and we look forward to seeing you again. In 2 weeks, we will be interviewing, I believe, Tochi Onyebushi and Nivo. Both of them are Hugo finalists in the novella category. And we're really excited to have a conversation with them.
I love them. I'm definitely going to be watching that.
All right. Thank you. This has been Essence of Wonder.
Without Gabby Ebron.
Thank you.
Without Gabby Ebron.